Start with breaking news at 7 p.m. Eastern. A mad dash for reporters today on Capitol Hill. They spent the afternoon chasing the Doge duo, Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy. You can see Musk brought his son with him there. Little ride on the shoulders as they walked around. Also, screen right, a defiant Pete Hegseth. Pete Hegseth is the nominee for defense secretary, who claims he will not back down unless God or Donald Trump tells him to.
I don't answer to anyone in this group. None of you. Not to that camera at all. I answer to President Trump, who received 76 million votes on behalf and a mandate for change. I answer to the 100 senators who are part of this process and those in the committee. And I answer to my Lord and Savior. There it is. New reporting tonight shows that against all odds, and in a very different position than he was at this time last night, Pete Hegseth might actually be confirmed. But first, here in New York City, the massive manhunt, where investigators say they're close to finding out who shot and killed United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. Whether or not they can find that person is a completely different story. For the first time, NYPD released images clearly showing the suspected shooter's face. These are surveillance photos from a hostel located 3 miles away from the shooting in Midtown Manhattan. A number of people staying at the hostel say police searched the building last night around 5 p.m. They say the suspect shared a room with at least 2 other people, one of whom is visiting from South America. We're also getting a little better timeline of the shooter's movement. CCTV footage clocked him leaving Central Park on a bicycle just minutes after the shooting. Surveillance video shows the man walking in Midtown Manhattan just before the shooting. Happened a little bit before 7 a.m. here in New York yesterday morning, so 36 hours from where we are right now. New York City Mayor Eric Adams assured everyone today that, in his words, the gunman won't get away.
We are on the right pathway, and we don't want to do anything that's going to not only impede the investigation, but hurt the prosecution of the person involved. But we feel that we're moving at a steady pace, and we're going to have someone apprehended.
And with that, we welcome you to the Farish Network on television. And first tonight, there is a couple of major questions that we're going to try to answer for you. Number one, is this assassin a Jason Bourne-style hitman, which is possible, or is it a man with a motive who knows a little bit about firearms? And those are two very different people, a professional assassin versus somebody with a real beef. We know the shooter inscribed messages on the bullets. Investigators found the words depose, deny, and defend on the shell casings at the scene. They believe the words are an ode to a health insurance book written by Jay Feinman in 2010 called Delay, Deny, Defund, why insurance companies don't pay claims and what you can do about it. The book is highly critical of the healthcare industry. But NYPD detectives tell NewsNation the fact the shooter left shell casings at all leads them to believe he is not a trained professional. One source told us he's sloppy. Pros do not leave this much evidence behind, and they are not seen in as many places as this guy was seen. And that said, the shooter has evaded police for 36 hours. Indications are police still don't know who he is. In fact, we did some digging and found at least 3 flights out of JFK within just hours of the shooting to countries that do not have extradition treaties with the United States. There was a Cathay Pacific flight to Hong Kong at 9 a.m. That would have been tight to make. Qatar Airways flight, 10:20 a.m. to Doha. And then there was the Saudi flight to Jeddah at 11 a.m. It's entirely possible the shooter made it onto one of those flights or hundreds of others from either Newark, LaGuardia, or JFK. Connected again, he is anywhere in the world. And that could have happened before anyone really knew what was going on. Adding to the confusion, we've learned about a series of bomb threats at 2 different homes in Maple Grove, Minnesota, owned by the Thompson family. Wall Street Journal reported Brian and his wife lived separately, although were still married, and had been separately living for a couple of years. Then there's this. Police reports from 2018. Thompson's wife, Paulette, reported hearing someone trying to enter her front door, although officers never found anything suspicious. And that's important because Thompson's wife told NBC her husband was receiving threats leading up to the murder. There's an enormous amount to unpack here as an assassin who put 3 bullets in the back of a healthcare executive on a busy Manhattan street yesterday morning remains on the run. Dr. Oscar Odom, former NYPD detective, now teaches public safety at the University of Virginia. Tim Gallagher, FBI special agent in charge in both Washington and the Newark field offices throughout his career. Gentlemen, both of you are awesome to be here. Thank you very much. Tim, I want to start with you in this idea of motive. Is the messages on the bullet casing real messages? Or is it a very, very cleverly designed ploy to make everyone think that this is a disgruntled member of the United Healthcare Network or a patient or a patient's family member who's upset, and really there's something else going on?
Well, first off, thanks for having me today, and it's a very interesting question. What you're seeing right there, no motivation is off the table as far as law enforcement is going, as far as the investigation is going right now. Could this be the equivalent of staging a crime scene, right, by writing on these bullets and leaving them behind? They weren't just shell casings; they were actually live rounds as well, which definitely speaks to the expertise of the individual, the fact that they were left behind. But yeah, sure, it could be a way of trying to throw investigators off the scent. It could be a disgruntled employee still, and not someone who had an issue with a claim that was submitted. But as I said, all motivations are under consideration by law enforcement right now. And the main focal point, identify who he is, get him in handcuffs.
Dr. Odom, that brings us to trying to identify who this is, because there's pictures of him wearing this light-colored backpack that we're looking at. There's pictures of him wearing a dark backpack. That's the one where you could see his face. How much are we to believe the NYPD knows but is not telling us?
A lot. The greatest detectives in the world. They do what they have to do. It's standard. One of the things that you look at is so many times when criminals do something, they don't realize how much evidence they leave behind. Before all this information even came out, I was having general conversations, talking about the fact that, there's other motives on the table. There's definitely a hit job, but also to check the phones of other people related to him, his close inner circle, perhaps his spouse, to just look at these different lines, text messages, phone calls, hitting the different towers, all the different areas where he went. When he discarded the phone, you could pick up where he left off there and follow him a little bit and see if he picked up anything else while he was going forward. Facial recognition. There's so many different things that was left. And also, it was a hit job because there was a lady right there. He didn't do anything to the lady that was there when he did his assassination attempt. So we know it's something.
So we know it was a hit job. We know this guy was targeted. He was there for Investor Day. The time and place of Investor Day was not released until a couple of weeks before. So somebody had to be trying to set this up. And I guess, Tim, the question to you is, how commonplace are true murder for hire? You think about there's movies made about hitmen and assassins for hire. When you take a look at the whole spectrum of evidence we have so far, is that what this looks like, or is that sort of what everyone wants it to be because it makes for a better story?
Sure. That whole narrative of murder for hire is in fact very rare. In my 20 years in the FBI, rare. More often than not, in a murder for hire, the person who's hired is an undercover agent or an undercover police officer who is hired by the target. So, but
you mean like a sting operation? Someone tries to hire somebody, but then gets found out and gets arrested before there's actually a real assassin hired.
Steps in, and offers their services, and accepts payment, and then the target gets arrested at that point. As we said, everything is still on the table at this point. This could, in fact, be the case here, but it is, in fact, extremely rare.
Just from your experience, because in terms of murder for hire cases, the FBI is the people who are at the forefront of those investigations. Based on what we've seen, that this guy was caught without his balaclava on, with his full face there that we can see. The fact that there were shell casings left, the fact that the weapon jammed a couple of times, leading us to believe he hadn't fired that weapon with that ammunition before to see how it would react. The fact that he missed center mass on his first shot, the fact that he didn't walk all the way up within a couple of inches of his target, so he was sure to hit on the first shot. Does that seem like this is a quote-unquote true professional?
Yeah, obviously some of the tradecraft that you just cited there is not only leaves evidence, but it creates a trail that law enforcement is able to if he shows up in one place, they can pull cameras from across the street, and obviously generating more evidence, and leads to different ways for him to ultimately get caught. But yeah, that this is there is some sloppiness here, but still, you saw he's masked, he's wearing gloves. And he has a silencer. This was well thought out. He shows up just before the arrival of the victim. So this was mapped out. It was planned. Was there some sloppiness? Yes. But this was a professional job.
Or well planned by someone who knew firearms. Dr. Odom, in terms of looking backwards, and I think that's always the interesting part here, laymen like myself always focus on, where'd he go? Where'd he go? You all look at where'd he come from. How easy is it in this case to go back? Because they've got this hostile point. Where do you back up from there?
Well, one of the things, when you look at that, you look at all the different fake identification that he provided. You look at fingerprints that was given there. Then you begin to backtrack off of that, because those things are indicators, because people don't realize that whenever you walk into a room, no matter what you think you're doing, you're leaving evidence. So no matter, it could be from your shoes, it could be from skin follicles, all those different things. You leave in evidence every time you turn inside any type of room. So therefore, what do you make
of the fact that he did this in New York City? I mean, you think about Brian Thompson, travels all over the country, lives in Minnesota. His house doesn't look particularly well guarded. Is doing it in New York City sort of the perfect place for a hit, or a huge mistake?
Well, it's a huge mistake, but it's a perfect place if you want notoriety, or if you want people to look at it, because you can say, I did this in New York. So he has the notoriety that he did it in New York, but now he's going to get caught. So that's one of the things
you seem really sure about that.
Oh, most definitely. No doubt about that. He's going to get caught. You leave too much evidence anytime you go on these scenes, and when the detectives and everybody else are working on a case, that's it. Everybody thinks that they're so smart, but they eventually get caught. No matter who you are, you eventually get caught. So time will tell, and we will see.
All right. So, Tim, in terms of this issue of getting caught, at least for NYPD, and to a certain extent for the FBI, right? The idea that a high-profile executive gets targeted in this way and is executed, for lack of a better term, now brings up this whole question about the security and the safety of America's top executives. Big tech CEO security spending. Meta spends $24 million for Mark Zuckerberg. Alphabet, that's Google, almost $7 million. Tesla for Elon Musk, $2.4 million, although it's reported that a lot of his security comes from other places. He has a much larger detail. Apple for Tim Cook, only $800,000. Is this going to all of a sudden change drastically the way people are guarded, number one, but sort of take that a beat further? Even in a situation like this, if you had one or two bodyguards with him, it wouldn't have been all that hard to pull off. Donald Trump was surrounded by the most heavily armed and well-trained bodyguards in the world, and people still got within a quarter of an inch of killing him, not once but twice.
Right. Putting the facts of this case aside, as far as the threat level, because we're still trying to figure out what the threat level was. Routinely when we work these types of things, if you have an event that's advertised, right, people know who's going to be where, when they're going to be there, what the after events are. You have event security and you have executive protection as well, right? You need them both. They're not mutually exclusive. One is to protect the people at the event. The other is to be on the principle to get him in, get him out, and to protect him. And you will definitely be seeing a spike. I've seen it already in my practice with companies reaching out and saying, hey, look, we need to take a second look at the way we walk around the city. But some of these executives are resistant, right? They want to be a man or a woman of the people, walking around, and interacting, and those days may be over. Well,
you want to be a man or woman of the people. If you're a man who's separated from his wife, you may not want a couple guys following you around all the time who can be deposed to look at what you are or are not doing with your days. What does the next 48 hours look like from an NYPD perspective?
Well, we're still combing through all the evidence. We're looking at all the footage of the tape. We're looking at cell phone records, cell phone towers. Should be looking at inner circle people to look at their cell phones, also messages that came in and out of their phones. Also, the spouses. We should also be looking at their spouses, the spouse's phone, and see what type of calls, messages were also received there. And the thing is, the future, like just stated by my colleague there, executives should have security with them. Part of my career in NYPD, I served in intelligence division. I was on the mayor's security detail. You should always have somebody with you, event and also personal.
Yeah. It's sort of a wild new world. We're in, I'll give you, Tim, the last side of this. How wide has this dragnet gotten? We laid out how many flights leave JFK. There's Newark also. You take a flight from LaGuardia and all of a sudden you're anywhere in the country, and then another flight, change identities, whatever it is. How wide is this right now?
Well, sure. And now we're 36 hours into it. We have a pretty good idea what this person looks like. The picture's out there. But yeah, I mean, there, 3 airports within just a quick hop and a jump, but like lots of cameras there. I'm sure the FBI, the Port Authority PD, and the NYPD are all scouring every one of those cameras that they're pulling from those airports. We talked about how he got there, possibly, and how he got away. But that's the dragnet at this point is the globe, and the law enforcement, the FBI, NYPD are all over the world. And he can't outrun them. And
I think you make a great point, both of you, in terms of doing it in New York. They knew it was Investor Day. You can target them there, but then all of a sudden you got NYPD and the FBI, who has their biggest field office now, on the dragnet instantly. Gentlemen, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you. Make no mistake about it. Okay, this shooter is a coward. He shot an unarmed man in the back, and he did, as we told you, leave significant clues to his motive. Will the killing spark a new conversation about why healthcare CEOs make tens of millions of dollars and how they do it? Whoever this assassin was, he's a coward, plain and simple. He shot an unarmed man and father in the back. That is the epitome of cowardice. But he also left behind some clues to his motives, or at least what he wants us to think his motives are. He marked his bullets. Sources say shell casings recovered at the crime scene had deny, depose, defend written on them. So this senseless act of violence has sparked a broader conversation about the inner workings of the health insurance industry. Just take a look at these graphs. Over the past decade, insurance premiums have steadily increased, going up $9,000 for families and nearly $3,000 for a single person's premium. Not only are costs rising, but denials are too. That's why healthcare executives make tens of millions of dollars. They continue to see the number of procedures denied coverage rising, number of drugs denied. LendingTree tells us no major insurer denies more claims than United Health. You can see them in gold all the way on the right of your screen. Kaiser only 7%, Cigna 18%, Aetna 20%, United Healthcare 32%. Brian Thompson was the CEO of United Healthcare, which is the biggest part of United Health Group. So none of this justifies the actions of a coward, but the cost of healthcare is a conversation now taking place around kitchen tables tonight. Forensic psychiatrist Carol Lieberman is here. Dr. Oscar Odom, former NYPD detective who also specializes in public safety, teaches that now, is with us. Nice to see both of you. Carol, I want to start with you. In terms of these kinds of crimes, for someone to become so angry to the point, if we assume that the writings on the bullets lead us to believe that this person was a United Healthcare customer or member who had their coverage denied or a relative died, what is the flop over from someone being so angry and so hurt by loss to all of a sudden planning a heinous crime?
Yes, I think that is most likely the motive. Someone who, either a hitman or a family member or someone that the family got hired, whether they were a professional hitman or not, they are expressing the rage of the family. Here you see an executive making $10 million a year, and your mother or your father got denied, and they died. And now, again, we don't know this for sure, but this seems like the most likely scenario. Of course, you're going to feel rage. And this is a conversation. I mean, of course, it's unfortunate that he died, but this is a conversation that needs to be on the table, needs to be talked about much more than it has been, because there are people dying all the time because of this kind of thing. So, I can tell you specifically in psychiatry that, it's because of insurance that psychiatrists have become pill pushers. In other words, insurance companies aren't paying psychiatrists enough anymore to do hour-long therapy sessions. So a lot of psychiatrists, not myself, but a lot of psychiatrists have turned to pill pushing, to just seeing patients for 20 minutes and giving them prescriptions, which, of course, no prescription cures whatever it is that the person has. You have to go into what is underlying it, what is causing it, what happened in their life when they were a child.
The insurance companies are in the business of making money. That's just how they build all their big buildings, whether it's health insurance or life insurance. Dr. Odom, one of the things that people are focused on, and there's a difference between a planned attack, which this very clearly was, and a targeted attack, and whether the person was a professional hitman or whether they were just someone who knew firearms. There's a moment in this video where you see him fire, he hits the victim's leg, and then he's clearing the weapon. So clearly he's proficient with firearms, but the weapon keeps jamming. Does that lead us to believe that this is someone who is, quote unquote, a hired assassin, or someone who's just very angry and learned how to shoot?
Very angry, learned how to shoot. Somebody hired him or set him up to do this, and that was it. A regular person, if you watch enough movies, especially these days, or the game shows, you know how to jam a weapon, cock it, load it, whatever, in the chamber. So it's well done. But this person, as you could tell, definitely it was a hit job. He definitely was for hire. This was nobody walking off the street. He knew the timing. He knew what time to wait out there, approximately what time the person came out. So it was connected with something else. So he also has somebody that he's working with. Also, he has the schedule, because for him to be out there at that particular
knew exactly.
time, he knew exactly.
Exactly. But Carol, I want to get back to this just from a psychiatry standpoint. And this is, as you said, a conversation now all of a sudden happening across America. And we've been taught, and I think rightly so, to never blame the victim, right? Whatever Brian Thompson did, he did not, in whatever his business was, that doesn't mean you deserve to get killed. But the fact now that so many people across America are willing to jump to, but insurance companies are terrible, and let me tell you about them denying this and denying that, and my kid who couldn't go see a specialist, and on and on and on. And then it's all of a sudden now exploding in conversation. What does that tell us about the psyche of America as it relates to insurance companies?
Well, that there's a lot of anger that people have been sort of forced to repress, because it's very hard to get redress. They have these boards that you can appeal to, but really, I know from my own experience with patients, who have had various medical problems, that when they try to appeal it, they get nowhere. So
every doctor has that story. It just in every family, especially families who have loved ones who have real problems, have those stories. Carol, thank you very much. Detective Dr. Odom, thank you very much. We appreciate it. More throughout the hour, although we've been told the NYPD will not have another press conference tonight. Now to Washington. Pete Hegseth, the embattled nominee for Secretary of Defense. He may do the impossible. Can he personally bring his nomination back from the dead? Politics, things change. Just 24 hours ago, Pete Hegseth's confirmation to be the next Secretary of Defense looked all but dead. And now, 24 hours later, against all odds, it seems like he has another shot. He could actually get over the finish line.
I was very favorably impressed, quite honestly. Yes. So I have seen no reason at this point to not be supportive of him. I've known Pete for a long time. I served with him in Afghanistan. The people over there said nothing but great things about him. The allegations against Pete are all anonymous
anonymous sources. I am not going to make any decision based on an anonymous source.
And to be clear, over the weekend, Lindsey Graham was one of the ones leading the charge that Pete Hegseth's nomination was dead on arrival. So you have two very different things happening in about 72 hours, and Lindsey Graham is normally a lagging indicator. So if he's now saying, maybe Pete's back, then that means there's a lot of other people saying it before Lindsey Graham is. Hegseth faced a number of serious questions about his character, including that he suffers from severe drinking problems and that he mistreats women. Today, he told the press he would not be talking about them.
I don't answer to anyone in this group. None of you. Not to that camera at all. I answer to President Trump, who received 76 million votes on behalf and a mandate for change. I answer to the 100 senators who are part of this process and those in the committee. And I answer to my Lord and Savior.
With that, Roma Daravi, Deputy Director of Strategic Communications in the Trump White House, is with us. Roma, it's always good to see you. Who do you think gave him that line?
Oh, Leland, you know Pete. You worked with him at Fox. He's a very straightforward person, and he's going to be very straightforward with the American people. He wrote an op-ed recently. He sat down with Megyn Kelly and did an hour-long podcast. He in no way, shape, or form is hiding from anything. He's on the Hill. He's talking to senators, and he's going to answer every question they have. What he's not going to do is make a blanket statement on any accusation that the press seems to bring forward that has absolutely no backing to it.
Yeah, come on, though. Pull back the curtain for us a little bit in Trump world. This is a change, right? He went from sort of talking about the accusations and attacking each accusation, then all of a sudden today something changed. And now all of a sudden he has this line of, I answer to my Lord and Savior and my wife. What's that strategy? There's something going on there about turning the media into the enemy, and that works well in MAGA world.
I'm not necessarily certain that that's what he's doing, turning the media into the enemy. He's talking to the press. He's just refusing to repeat allegations over and over again. There's actual substance to talk about when it comes to the Department of Defense. We have a major recruitment problem that he's ready to tackle head on, and it has to do with a lot of the woke ideology that's been pushed from the top at the Pentagon.
We reported on that he said, I'm going to end all wokeness. Is sort of his big mantra at the Defense Department. Mark Caputo, national political reporter for The Bulwark, with us, well-sourced to say the least, inside Trump world in Mar-a-Lago. Mark, am I right to think that something happened in the last 24 hours in terms of the strategy for Hegseth from defending the allegations and denying them to this, I don't answer to the press for these allegations, I'm speaking to the senators? Does that give him more breathing room than he had 24 hours ago?
You're really perceptive to see a change in strategy. Look at Matt Gaetz. Matt Gaetz was shackled by Trump's team. He was told not to talk to the press, so he really didn't, except for answering like a brief question on the fly. Obviously, Hegseth has made the case that he needs to make the case himself at these gaggles of reporters because this is just not going away. And I agree with your statement that this is one way to turn the press into a foil. If you're going to make Republican hearts go pitter-patter, it's to go at the press and to go at these allegations this way in the fashion that Pete Hegseth just did.
At the same time, you got to get to 50+1 votes, right? And that's where the math just works in the United States Senate. You can afford to lose 3 Republican senators, and then you would get J.D. Vance to make the tie. Joni Ernst being one of the key senators, a combat vet herself, someone who's spoken out a lot about sexual harassment and assault in the military. Here she is after having met with Hegseth.
I think for a number of our senators, they want to make sure that any allegations have been cleared, and that's why we have to have a very thorough vetting process.
So that's not a yes, even right now, Roma, after meeting with Pete Hegseth. How much political capital is Donald Trump, Roma, willing to expend on Pete Hegseth when he expended precisely 0 on Matt Gaetz? Has Team Trump learned something?
Well, look, I'll say this. Pete has clearly taken a page out of, no, that's all right. Pete has taken a page out of Trump's playbook. We inside of the Trump world do not address allegations over and over and over again. We've made a statement. You can look back at it if you need to, and that's what he's done here. He's addressed the allegation and he's moved on. And at this point, he's going to talk to the senators because, like you said, this is no longer a problem that the American people have to worry about. They spoke in November. They voted overwhelmingly for President Trump and his policies, which includes a position that Pete Hegseth is taking when it comes to the Pentagon and the military. So that's what he's doing now. He's focusing on
this
making
is no surprise to pick people who want to burn the House down.
The agenda.
Yeah, no, there's no surprises here in terms of what Donald Trump is doing. Mark, I want to get you in, but I thought this was interesting when I looked at the two main pictures that Pete Hegseth tweeted out today. Hegseth with Capitol Police, grateful to all the Capitol Police officers and personnel who have dutifully and professionally supported us all week. We might not have made it down the hallways without you. Hegseth on serving. Maybe it's time for a SecDef who has led in combat, been on patrol for days, pulled the trigger, heard bullets whiz by, called in close air support, led medevacs, dodged IEDs, and understands to his core the power of this photo because he's been on that knee before. There is a real change in Mark in terms of the strategy. Is that Pete Hegseth or is that Donald Trump's strategy?
I think it's Pete Hegseth allowing and being allowed to say that. The question about how much political capital Trump is willing to spend, so far not a lot. But if Hegseth continues to make the case this way, I think you'll see him spend a little more. But Trump's overall view with his nominees is this. They've got to earn it. It's their job to get to 53 votes or really 51 votes. That's what they need. And so far, Hegseth isn't there, and we're just going to have to see if he's able to cross that finish line. He's got about 2 more weeks until the Senate goes in session. And what do senators really, really hate? They really hate a gaggle of reporters bird-dogging outside of their offices and asking them if they're going to confirm the drunk rapist. Now, let me be very clear. I'm not saying that Pete Hegseth is a rapist. He was not charged with it. He was accused of sexual assault. There wasn't enough evidence to show it, and he essentially says it was consensual. But the way the questions get asked and the way it gets heard back home and the way it gets framed in the media and in social media is very important. And the senators don't like that heat. And who put that heat on them? Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump. So at what point is Hegseth going to be able to cool things down?
To be fair, the flip side of that is Pete is now putting the press on defense, right? That's where we see the pushback. Roma, I'm going to give you the last word after this soundbite from last night. Take a listen to Chris Cillizza on the show.
I remember when we were on talking about Matt Gaetz. It was a brief period, right? 8 days. But I was on with you at one point in there. And I said, look, the happiest people about all the scrutiny on Matt Gaetz are literally everyone else he has picked.
Seeing Pete Hegseth survive right now and thrive, right? He's doing better than he did 24 hours ago, which is better than 24 hours before that. Are people on Team Trump looking back and saying pulling Matt Gaetz was a mistake?
I can't tell you what they're thinking about Matt Gaetz right now, but Pete Hegseth is a great choice, and he's spoken directly to the public every day, to those press in the hallways, telling them, I was on the phone with Trump today. He's supportive of me being here. He's telling me to keep fighting, and that's exactly what he's doing. You've got a Princeton, Harvard alum with a Bronze Star medal that's not going to stop fighting for the American people.
We know the resume, but I will add to that.
I don't know that the American people do, though, because the media keeps calling him all of these names.
Somebody else who had a great resume was Brett Kavanaugh. Who did just this, who fought.
And they're trying to do the same thing to him that they did to Brett Kavanaugh. That is what the press is doing right now.
Okay, I was making your point for you.
He's fighting.
I was. All right, Roma, good to see you. Mark, good to see you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, somebody else went to Washington today. Mr. Musk went to Washington. Not exactly the Capper-esque moment. What Washington is going to teach Elon Musk that will leave the world's richest man thoroughly humbled. Elon Musk walked around Capitol Hill today like a one-man wrecking ball. He had swapped his Occupy Mars t-shirt for a suit and tie, and you can see there his security detail, private security, kept reporters away. Musk doesn't much like hard questions about his new project called Doge. Department of Government Efficiency. Creating government efficiency will be slightly harder than occupying Mars. Members of Congress dutifully talked about how much they supported DOGE today. You could also rename DOGE DOA, dead on arrival. Members of Congress, and I know this because I spend a lot of time with them, love nothing more than supporting something that sounds great and means nothing. Take, for example, a $15 million program to study monkey flatulence in Rwanda. That is an easy one for everyone to agree on. Really, it must go. So here's why DOGE means nothing. Entitlement programs, Social Security and Medicare make up about 62% of government spending. Add on 11% for the interest on the national debt. What's left includes defense spending that Trump promises to increase, so that's not going to get touched. So the truth is, even if Musk cuts a quarter of discretionary spending, we're talking about just 25% of less than 11% of the total budget. Those are the things like the monkey flatulence study. Okay, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. I made up the monkey flatulence study. But it would not surprise you in the least that the government would have one. Unless we are going to talk about Medicare and Social Security reforms, cutting back on government waste is rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. It just is. And now I'll give you a real example why. Because Republicans love talking about ending funding to PBS. It's one of their big talking points. Bill O'Reilly wrote about it in his column. It would require 60 votes in the Senate, so it won't happen, but DOGE will, of course, recommend it and people will talk about it. Huge win for Musk if it happens. PBS accounts for 0.008% of government spending. So compared to the average household income, that percentage, if you're doing your yearly budget, that would be like an American family cutting out just one of the following things: 2 gallons of gas over a year, or a McDonald's Happy Meal. It doesn't change your budget. It is meaningless. DOGE is a joke, and that's just fine with Congress. In fact, they want it to be a joke. And so do all the fine folks in Washington, no matter what they say. And here's why. What I'm about to tell you is the real story, and it's not DOGE. For all the rightful complaints about the government waste, inefficiency, legal graft, all that stuff, the federal government does one thing exceptionally well. It makes Washington and the people living in Washington really rich. So we'll follow the money. According to Axios, Washington, D.C. has the highest threshold for 1%ers in America, 1.22 million. To be in the top 1% in Washington, you have to make $1.22 million. It's not Silicon Valley. It's not Palm Beach. It's not the Upper East Side. Nowhere else in America does it take more to be in the top 1% than it does in Washington, D.C. by a lot. Washington exists to make itself rich. It does that very well. The top 1% in D.C. don't create anything. They don't invent new products or discover new drugs. They don't manufacture anything. They don't take risk as entrepreneurs. They don't build companies which enrich the lives of thousands of employees. No. Most of the 1% in D.C. and most of the D.C. elite serve themselves and live in one way or another off the taxpayers. It's in their best interest for the government to forever grow. So it's not just D.C. proper, right? Our producer Andrew Roberts pointed out earlier today, 4 of the 7 wealthiest counties in America surround D.C. Trump's new crew moving to D.C. will be richer than his last. And the last team did pretty well for themselves. The Intelligencer writes, add in Elon Musk and the other members of Trump 2.0 entourage who don't require Senate confirmation, their combined net worth $340 billion. Joe Biden's cabinet worth less than $120 million. There's nothing billionaires love more than the government spending money. It's one of the many ways they get rich. We wrote about this first in War Notes. That's our daily newsletter. It comes out every day, 4:05 p.m. Eastern. You can sign up for free at warnotes.com. Democrats on TV love trashing Donald Trump's cabinet picks, but Democrat senators have been oddly silent about it. Is that because they're scared of Donald Trump? punditry class is livid with Democrats in the Senate over their lack of outrage, they say, with Donald Trump's cabinet picks. Our buddy Paul Waldman penned a takedown of Democratic senators. Democrats need to grasp that during Trump's second term, the electorate won't be evaluating them either as individuals or as a party based on whether they acted in good faith and sought areas of agreement with the GOP. The truth is, voters don't care about bipartisanship. Paul Waldman, author of White Rule Rage, MSNBC columnist, friend of the show, is with us now. Maybe not, but isn't one of the message voters sent that they wanted stuff done, not just Washington fighting with each other?
Sure. And if you ask them in polls, do you want Democrats and Republicans to work together? They'll say yes. But that's not how they act when election time comes around. And, you know, for almost as long as I've been reporting, Democrats have always made this effort to show, even though they know they're going to end up opposing what the Republicans do, they want to show that they're reaching out, they're making an effort, they're trying to be bipartisan. And the point I was making is that voters just don't care. Especially when there's a new president, what you find is 2 years later, you have a midterm election, and almost always the voters come back and they say, well, we're really not happy with what's going on. That's a judgment they're making of the party in power. They're not saying we're going to vote for Democrats in 2026 because we think they did a good job of trying to be bipartisan. If they vote for Democrats in 2026, it's going to be because they're unhappy with what the Trump administration and the Republican Congress is doing. And so there's no point in wasting all this time showing how bipartisan you want to be. I mean, maybe there'll be opportunities to vote for things that Republicans put up, but it's not going to happen very often. And, you know, we just got through an administration of 4 years of a president trying so hard to get Republicans to join him. And a couple of times they did on a couple of bills, like the infrastructure bill, but nobody cared. Voters didn't take that into account. It's just not something the electorate cares about.
I promised you the last 90 seconds of the show. I have given them to you. We appreciate you coming. Thank you. We're going to have you back to talk about this because the confirmation votes are coming up. More on the manhunt, worldwide manhunt with Chris.